Cedar Point is considered the roller coaster capital of the world, and for good reason. When it comes to the coaster lineup, there's no park that can match Cedar Point top to bottom. This is our complete review of the world's greatest roller coaster park. We will discuss the coasters, food, and some tips and tricks we have for visiting this park that will definitely help you on your visit. Coasters are the reason to visit Cedar Point. This park is built around the coasters. From Steel Vengeance to Magnum XL200, this lineup is absolutely stacked. Cedar Point has an amazing top 3, but its supporting coasters would be standout rides at any other park. We'll start off with the park's best attraction, Steel Vengeance. This ride is perfect. People in the comments are gonna say we're just another pair of Steel Vengeance fanboys, but it is such a good ride. People just like to hate on popular things. It has the most airtime of any coaster in the world, perfectly placed in forceful inversions, and 80 seconds of prime ride time. This attraction starts off with an obnoxiously loud lift hill, which is so loud you literally have to yell to talk to the person next to you. The 200-foot drop is one of the best we have experienced. However, unlike most coasters, it is not the standout moment of the ride. Then you have two of the greatest airtime moments on any coaster, the top hat and outer bank. They are so sustained and powerful that it feels like you are going to get thrown off the train. We personally prefer the outer bank because it is just a little bit stronger and more sustained. The step up and 0G roll that follow are a great complement to the intense and sustained airtime from the previous elements. And the 0G stall that dives back towards the ground is so whippy I accidentally elbowed my brother in the head. Steel Vengeance provides more airtime throughout the rest of the layout, including the underrated off-axis airtime hill into the structure. This coaster also has one of the craziest finales with a relentless string of bunny hills, each one delivering more airtime. This is definitely Cedar Point's best coaster, and the standout ride they needed. Cedar Point's next best coaster, Steel Vengeance's Frontier Town neighbor, this being the small but powerful Maverick, one of Intamin's best creations. This is one of the most intense coasters in North America. It starts off with a launched lift hill right into a 95-degree, 105-foot drop. This drop is crazy. It is best experienced in the back row. Right after the drop, you get snapped into the first bank turn, which delivers lots of positive G's. You then have two more of these snaps before an intense ejector airtime hill. Then you go into the unique horseshoe roll, which is essentially two back-to-back corkscrews. These two inversions are the only break you get on this ride, as they don't offer much in the forces department. They are still two fun and floaty inversions, but they feel out of place in this layout. You'll then travel through a right turn and into a tunnel under the station where you'll encounter the second launch. It is very strong for magnetic launch, and it sends you into this turnaround towards the two stangle dives. These elements are both incredibly powerful, and the second especially is one of the more intense elements on any coaster. Finally, Maverick traverses a speed hill and hits the brake run. A lot of people complain about the restraints on this attraction, but they don't bother me. Sure, the lap bar is bulky, but I still had enough room to lift out of my seat during the airtime moments, and I pretty much forget that the soft straps are even there until the stangle dives. Overall, this coaster is just another Intamin masterpiece with its jack of all trades layout. I want to add that the queue gets very hot and crammed inside of the building, and it seems to drag on forever, but Maverick is definitely worth the wait. Another Intamin creation is Millennium Force, the new for 2000 Giga Coaster. This ride is not forceless. Right out of the station, you'll fly up the 300-foot cable lift. This is our favorite lift hill. The views are incredible with Lake Erie on the left and Cedar Point on the right. The drop is one of the best in the world. It is so sustained, but still has good power to it as well. The following overbank is anything but forceless, and despite it being 150 feet in the air, you haul through it. I often find myself graying out on this element. Then you bank into a left turn and into a tunnel, which is extremely loud. The rest of the ride consists of a couple of overbanks and floater hills, the last speed hill being the strongest. I love how this ride flies past the queue. It makes for some really nice footage and shows just how fast you are actually going. I will admit that this attraction is not on the same level as Maverick or Steel Vengeance, but those are both top 15 coasters in the world, so that's an extremely high bar. I would argue that Millennium Force is still Cedar Point's signature attraction even 23 years after it opened. It is a GP magnet, although it does have better capacity than the other coasters we have mentioned, so the line doesn't get quite as long. Millennium Force is also a coaster where you have to wait for the front row at least once, even though we actually prefer the back row because it offers much better airtime. Raptor is a B&M invert which still holds its own as one of the best inverts in the world almost 30 years later. This attraction specializes in whippy inversions and strong positive Gs. The best inversions are the 0G roll and the two corkscrews. When the mid-course brake run isn't hitting so hard, the second half of Raptor is a a riot. The two corkscrews deliver a ridiculous whip and positive G's, and the final helix tries to rip off your legs. Raptor is also very smooth, with no rattle at all. This B&M capacity monster is located at the front of the park. For that reason, the line typically peaks early in the morning and gradually dies down throughout the day. GateKeeper is a fun ride and possibly the most overhated coaster in America. The wing over drop is best experienced in the front right of the train because you get hang time and laterals as the train rotates around the track. It's really an odd feeling. The signature element on this coaster is the inversion through the keyholes. Cedar Point redid the entire front entrance when this coaster was built, and it looks spectacular. We do want to add that the head choppers through those keyholes aren't actually the greatest, but it's still amazing to look at. We also love the color scheme. The blue track and white supports fit really nicely with its setting next to the lake. GateKeeper isn't the most forceful ride, but that's fine because if you want some forceful rides, you can go ride the B&M invert across the midway or the Intamin Blitz in the back of the park. Come on, not every ride has to have insane forces to be a good ride. This is another B&M people eater in the front, and the line will peak in the morning and gradually die down throughout the day. Gemini is an aero hybrid constructed in 1978. Once the tallest, fastest, and steepest coaster in the world, this racing coaster is still a really great experience. There is some legit airtime on the ride, with one moment of ejector after one of the turnarounds. The racing aspect of the ride makes it so much better. We rode Gemini both while it was and wasn't racing, and can confidently say the racing aspect makes it way more fun. And you can even give people in the other train high fives on the turnarounds, even though I'm pretty sure the park tells you not to. Magnum XL 200 was the first ever hypercoaster and is known for its insane triangular shaped airtime hills. These hills deliver airtime so powerful that it actually hurts your thighs when you get flung into the lap bar. We got rides in both the front and in the magic seat, and the magic seat delivers stronger airtime, but not quite as much as advertised. Other than the airtime hills on the return run, the ride doesn't do much in my opinion. The first drop gives some floater, as does the hill into the turnaround, but that's it. The pullouts rattle you around, and the transitions are classic aero, which is to say, awful. While some people can look past these problems, there's nothing I hate more than bad transitions. Brugger is just another supporting coaster. The layout doesn't do much, and the floorless aspect doesn't really add anything either. In the short video that we made about Cedar Point, I mentioned that this should have been left as Mantis, which might have been an exaggeration. However, the point I was trying to make is that the layout is kind of bland for a floorless coaster. There's only one standout inversion, the corkscrew, and the lack of a 0G roll makes it a bottom tier floorless coaster. All in all, it's a decent ride, but there are so many other better coasters at the park. I wouldn't say it has a rattle or anything though. It is relatively smooth. At another park, it would be a bigger deal, but this is Cedar Point, so it is simply overshadowed. Blue Streak is the oldest operating coaster at the park, and this PTC wooden coaster is polarizing. Some people claim that it is smooth and gives airtime, while others claim that it doesn't have airtime and is very rough. We lean towards the rough side, especially on a wheel seat. My brother got some airtime. I did not. I got stapled. This was my most disappointing ride of the time we were there. Iron Dragon is a fun family suspended coaster that has a nice location over the water. This ride pleasantly surprised us. We weren't expecting much, but this is a fun ride. The swinging aspect is unique, and the second half is actually a lot of fun. This ride is not rough either. While this isn't as thrilling a coaster as, say, the Bat at Kings Island, it is still very fun. However, it does get a long line, so this is another coaster you have to either hit right away or wait until the evening. Woodstock Express is a Vekoma Junior coaster. We wrote it for the credit because we are spoiled thuzies. Corkscrew is one of the most painful coasters we have ever done. The bucket seats are uncomfortable and the transitions bang your head around. We only rode this coaster once because we got a headache from it. The two corkscrews do look great along the midway. Valraven was closed during our visit because the lift was broken, so we can't really comment on its specific layout. However, I will say that the dive coaster is an overhated model. Cedar Point has 4 major thrill flat rides: Windseeker, a Mondial Windseeker, Skyhawk, an SNS Scream and Swing, Power Tower, an SNS Space Shot and Drop Tower, and Max Air, a Huss Giant Frisbee. Windseeker is honestly the scariest ride at the park. It sits right next to the lake and feels extremely tall as there's nothing around it even remotely close to its height. You can find this at other Cedar Fair parks, but the view and setting is unique to Cedar Point. Skyhawk is an SNS Scream and Swing. You can also find these at other Cedar Fair parks, so this is a ride you can skip. Power Tower is your typical SNS combo tower, so you can also skip this. And Max Air was a disappointment. We thought that this ride would have great forces, but it doesn't, and the restraints are awful. They trap your head and make sure that you can't move your upper body at all. Cedar Point also has a decent Ferris wheel by the boardwalk. Overall, when it comes to flat rides, Cedar Point isn't even a top park in its own chain. Lately, people have been complaining that Cedar Point isn't the same anymore, and I couldn't really see why. It has a great atmosphere, great operations, friendly staff, and good food, which we will get to later. Yes, we didn't get to ride Valraven or Dragster because they were closed closed, but everything else about the park was great. However, I can also start to see why people are starting to criticize the park a little bit. We will also discuss this later. The park is almost always packed, especially during the afternoon hours. We went during the middle of August during a weekday, and it wasn't that busy until the afternoon. Cedar Point also generally gets hot during the afternoon, and the queues aren't shaded well, so it does get tiring being in the heat for a long time. We didn't really eat too much food in the park because it is really expensive, but the food we had was pretty good. Our first day we ate at Last Chance Saloon, located in Frontier Town. This restaurant has a variety of different options. We got a burrito bowl with plenty of customizable toppings. It was pretty much like Chipotle in the park. It was really good, and we got a good quantity of food, especially for the price. Our second day we ate at Backbeat Q, and as the name implies, it is a barbecue restaurant. It is located very close to Magnum. We enjoyed different meats like brisket, pulled pork, and burnt ends. Our meal also came with different sides. We suggest bringing snacks along in your car so that if you get really hungry, you can just walk out to your car, eat, and then walk back into the park instead of coughing up an extra $20. With our benefits from staying at a Cedar Point hotel, we got free drink wristbands that allowed us to get any drink in the park. This came in handy when we had to wait in a lot of long and hot lines. During our visit, we stayed at the Express Hotel. A lot of people recommend staying at Hotel Breakers, but honestly, I just don't see the benefit. From my point of view, it makes more sense to stay at the Express Hotel and then use the money that you saved to buy Fastlane passes instead. Don't get me wrong, Breakers and Lighthouse Point are fantastic places to stay, but the Express Hotel is a solid option. It's basically like any chain hotel. You know, your Comfort Inns and Holiday Inns of the world. It has a pool, plaza, and a snack and merchandise store. Cedar Point also has two other off-site hotels, Castaway Bay and Sawmill Creek, but if you're going to stay off-site, you might as well just stay at the Express Hotel, unless you want the indoor water park that Castaway Bay offers. Before we made this video, I would have highly recommended staying at the Cedar Point Hotel. However, I'm not going to say that anymore. The early entry lineup just isn't good enough in my opinion. The only major coaster open for early entry is GateKeeper. This is what I was talking about when I mentioned I can see why people are starting to criticize the park. Steel Vengeance, Maverick, and Millennium Force all used to be early entry rides. However, staying at a Cedar Point hotel still gives you free parking and unlimited drink wristbands, so it still might be worth it, depending on what other hotels in the area cost. These are our recommendations on some different tips and tricks to maximize your experience at Cedar Point, while saving as much money as possible. One thing that I'd like to mention is that I highly recommend spending 2 days at Cedar Point. This coaster lineup is so deep that it really does take 2 days to experience it all, and our recommendations on which attractions to hit assumes that you are spending 2 days at the park. First and foremost, as we mentioned earlier, you should stay at a Cedar Point hotel. This gets you into the park an hour before everyone else, unlimited soft drinks and water, and not with those tiny cups they usually give out. Also, free parking. Cedar Point actually has 4 entrances, but the main entrance is the best one with Dragster closed right now. I'd recommend getting to the park half an hour before early entry starts because they will actually start letting people into the park 15 minutes before early entry. So once you're in the park for early entry, I recommend just lapping GateKeeper for about 40 minutes. Then walk back to Frontier Town and get in line for Steel Vengeance or Maverick. These two coasters won't open for another 15 minutes, but you won't have to wait much longer than that unless they don't open with the park, which is what happened to us. If the line is still short, which is less than 45 minutes in my opinion, get back in line because this is the shortest it will be all day. Whichever coaster in Frontier Town you don't ride, go get in line for the other. After this, it will probably be around 11:30, so whatever you do after that will be up to you. Staying in the back of the park and riding Magnum or Gemini is a pretty good idea before moving to the front of the park when the crowds start to shift to the back. Around mid-afternoon, the crowds will probably get pretty bad, and the temperature will start heating up, so waiting in lines won't be very enjoyable. Finally, we recommend not eating at regular times, like 1 or 6 o'clock, and instead eating at around 3 or 8 o'clock. One final thing I would like to add is that if this is a bucket list park that you've never been to, I honestly recommend not going this year. Dragster will be open in 2024, and the early entry lineup is frankly pretty lousy. Don't get me wrong, it's still a great park, but I'd recommend just waiting until 2024 so you can visit Cedar Point at its full potential. That will conclude our review of Cedar Point. We will have full reviews of some of the coasters posted shortly, and maybe we will do a full tips and tricks video, so subscribe if you want to see those videos. This park is truly incredible with its extremely deep coaster lineup, great location, food, and amazing atmosphere. It's a destination that every coaster enthusiast needs to visit at least once in their lifetime.